So you just got your buyer under contract. Congratulations, first and foremost. There's stuff that happens afterwards. Some of it will be handled by our rockstar staff led by Angela and the transaction coordination team. Other things require a license. And what you don't want to do is get yourself into a situation where you don't know what's happening next or you're giving the client wrong information. So we're going to break this down for you in a step-by-step process of who does what so that you can understand it and you know what you're responsible for and what the transaction coordination department's going to handle. Sound good, Ange?
Sounds good.
Angela hates videos. So this is a big deal for her coming on here, but it's going to really help you. So first and foremost, you get to an agreement. All parties come to terms. Step one, you need to have a fully executed agreement of sale. What that means, and Ange is going to go over all the other docs in a second here, because it's not just the agreement of sale. This means that everyone initialed every page, both the buyer and the seller. It means the acceptance date. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see veteran agents make that aren't with our organization because they don't know what to do. The acceptance date on page 2 is the date where all the final initials and signatures come in. If that date is before when everyone signed, you need to make an adjustment there. We're going to talk about how to do that. This only happens when everyone signed a contract. Don't make the mistake of announcing deals before they're signed, because if it's not fully executed, you don't have an agreement. So, what docs do they need, Ange?
So the agreement of sale, obviously. Any addendums that are checked off as being part of the agreement in section 32. So if there's an appraisal contingency, if there's a settlement of other property contingency, a big one that people miss is price escalation.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't used, get rid of it. Take it off the agreement. But anything checked off in section 32, I need that fully executed as well by the acceptance date that Tom mentioned. We also need the affiliated services rider. If they are electing to use TA of the main line for the title company, we need their ABA form signed. We need a buyer agency contract, a consumer notice, the executed seller's disclosure, a lead-based paint disclosure if the year built is applicable. I think it's
1978 or prior.
Yeah. The estimated closing costs at the agreed upon terms. So if you did any kind of price adjustments, you need to get an updating closing cost estimate signed. You need a buyer's financial information or a proof of funds. You need the pre-approval if they're electing a mortgage. I think that about covers it. Maybe the deposit money notice.
Deposit money notice is good practice to include. We're going to say yes on that as well. Couple things I want to highlight. Angela just went through all the different documents here. It is illegal in Pennsylvania to not include a buyer's closing cost estimate when an agreement of sale offer is made and when you have the final terms. That's got to get updated every single time you change something. So if the assist goes up for an inspection, if the settlement date changes, the prorations are going to be different. Anytime there's a material change to the contract, that document has to be signed, or you are in breach of real estate law. This is not some requirement we have. This is the law. Additionally, a buyer agency contract. It violates licensing law not to have a buyer agency agreement in place when you're writing an offer. That's just how the law works, and we follow the law here. Not anything complicated. These are things people often blow by that are outside of our organization. We're doing things the right way here to protect you as an agent. Anything else we missed there on the documents? I don't think so.
I don't believe so.
So you have all these documents done. Then you post the address in the executed contracts channel in Slack. And that triggers what?
So that triggers either myself or my virtual assistant, Jonery, to go through, and we will review all of the documents we just talked about for compliancy. And we will reach out to you if we notice anything that needs to be adjusted or is missing. And then when we have, if everything's good to go, then we'll get started on sending out the emails and processing the deal. So you'll see a few things come your way. The first thing we'll do is create what we call the blue sheet. So you'll see that appear in your loop. There's nothing you need to particularly do with that. It's just a summary of the transaction that we use on the back end to get the deal started. You'll see a dates to remember email come through that's sent to your client, which goes over their deadlines, the deposit information, who to make it out to, the mortgage and title deadline. It just brief summary of the transaction and what their next steps are. So you want to make sure you're reviewing that with your client when you see that email come through. We'll send something similar to the co-op agent. So we'll send an introductory email outlining the deadlines, giving them the title contact, the lender contact, making sure that we all start out on the same page. We will send that blue sheet to conveyancing. Our conveyancers are Kelly Parmiter and Jennifer Judge, and they will handle sending out the title application on your behalf. There's nothing you need to do there. So again, it's important on the affiliated services rider specifically, if they're electing to use TA, or if they're not, we need the title contact right away so we can get that submitted for you.
About title, real quick to jump in. Title Alliance, they prioritize our files and we work together with them and they're in our office here. So that's who you want to use in these situations. They're going to work much better with our company. All the title rates are set by the state. So we want to make sure that people are using a company we know they can get it closed, and that's why we work with Title Alliance.
Yes.
Keep going.
If a clue report was elected, which is also part of the affiliated services rider, we will send that to Kevin and Karen Hamill, who are great resources if you have any insurance related questions. And that's pretty much it up front for as soon as you go under contract. So the next step would be the pending process overall.
Yes. So here's the thing you want to realize here. Angela and her team, they're not licensed real estate agents, so they're going to really support you in a lot of ways. It's your responsibility to know when stuff's due. She's going to remind you. She's going to help you. If you miss a deadline and you just sat on it or you decided not to read it, that's your responsibility. And there are ramifications for this, including the client losing the house or losing deposit money. So read the emails. I don't know is not a great answer here when we're giving you all this information. I cannot stress this enough. We're going to make it easier. It's your job as a licensed agent to know what's going on.
And I do assign tasks to you in .loop. If you don't know how to check your tasks, I'm happy to go over it with you. But I do assign key deadlines to you there, so that's a quick, easy way to stay on track if you find that helpful.
So the email goes out. The client knows everything that's going on. The agent should be reading it and understanding that. One bonus hack I would put in here, if I'm a savvy agent, I'm asking for one of two things. I'm putting the deadlines in my calendar to know what's happening, or I'm setting reminders for myself in Boomtown under the lead. Because that way you know what's going on and you're getting reminded. You might want to do both, because when you miss these deadlines, for example, you miss an inspection deadline reply, the buyer's buying the home as is. People are not going to be cool with that. So there are significant issues here that can happen. So I'd be reminding myself in the calendar and in Boomtown when these deadlines are happening, because remember, if it's not in the calendar, it doesn't exist. So this goes out. Now we've got the deal starts moving ahead, right? What happens next?
One of the first deadlines you're going to encounter is the deposit. So you want to make sure that your buyers are submitting their deposit on time to the proper place. You will also see, as stated earlier, you will see Kelly and Jen submit the title application on your behalf. So you want to keep an eye out and make sure that title isn't requesting any additional information from you. You will hear from them throughout the process, so you want to make sure you're consistently checking your email and providing follow-up to anything that they need, because if they get stuck somewhere, they're going to need information from you. So just make sure you're keeping in contact with them.
You got to communicate. That's the biggest complaint about real estate agents. They don't communicate well with people. So you're talking about title. Obviously, deposit's the first thing that happens. You mentioned about wiring versus mailing it and how that's going to work out. The next big hurdle you're going to overcome after that is they got to file their mortgage application within 7 days.
Yes.
So you need to remind the buyer about this. That's not something we handle. We're not mortgage brokers here. So they got to file their mortgage application. We need to file a title application. These are all things that our sales management team is going over with you. In addition to that, the next big hurdle is going to be getting through the home inspection if that applies. So it's up to the buyer to schedule that. There's going to be a deadline in there. It's the amount of time to complete the home inspection and submit the reply. It's typically 10 or 15 days. The agreement defaults to 10, and that's the timeline the buyer has to get the inspection done and get a written reply over to the seller. If you miss that deadline, you're buying the home as is as a buyer. So that's probably the most critical thing to get on from a scheduling standpoint. And sometimes these folks are backed up, so you want to get on that right away. Then after the reply gets submitted, and there's 3 options with the reply. The buyer can accept it, they can terminate, or they can ask for a corrective proposal for either a credit or repairs. Then there's a 5-day negotiating window after the initial 10 or 15. It doesn't start when the reply gets sent. So if you got a 10-day deadline, day 1 is the day after everything gets signed. Angela's already calculating on this. You don't have to worry about it, but that's how it works. So let's say you sign this at the end of the month. The first of the month is day 1. Then you have until the 10th to submit the reply in writing to the listing agent. Then the 5 days starts right after that. So it goes 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Just making sure my math's right here. So you got 5 days to negotiate. Nobody can terminate the agreement then. There's a negotiation period. Then there's a 2-day window after that where the buyer can terminate if they're not satisfied with the negotiations. This is exactly what the agreement of sale says, and you should be reading through that document multiple times to understand it. That's going to be the biggest hurdle to get through here is going to be that home inspection. So it's really 10-5-2. It's not, well, we got the reply in 5 days, so it shortens the time frame up. The time frame's the time frame no matter what. It always goes until the end. Anything else you want to add in there?
Just reiterating that it has to be a written and signed reply. Sending an email to the listing agent isn't enough. Make sure you're either using the buyer's reply to inspection form or a change in terms addendum, something formal that's signed by the buyer.
Yeah, we use PAR documents here, the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. That's a great point. And if you're not hearing from the seller and you're up against like a deadline of it's your buyer's chance to terminate, you need to send a termination over for the seller to sign to protect their deposit money. That's where you want to go to the sales management team, have them walk you through it if you're getting to that level, if you're unsure what to do, because it's better to send it and reinstate the agreement than not send it all and then your buyer's screwed. So that's where you're going to want some help on that the first couple of times, but these deadlines are real. It's not, oh, I missed it, or not a big deal. These have implications. We cannot stress this enough.
And reading through the inspection report can be overwhelming, and there can be a lot of stuff on there that seems scarier than it is. So if you need help reading through it, Brian, our sales manager, would be a great source as far as negotiating piece, because again, we're not licensed. We can't advise you on that.
For sure. So assume you reach an agreement, right? And this actually is going to come back to what you do. If there's a credit involved or there's repairs involved, you got to let the transaction coordination team know, as well as the title company. The mortgage company, you need to let know about credits. You don't want to send them an addendum with a bunch of repairs on there because then they're going to want to go out and re-inspect it and look for invoices. You only want to let them know about seller's assist adjustments. Everyone else should have a copy of everything. The mortgage company only needs to know about changes that are related to seller's assist or the sale price.
And with that, if there's any changes to the price or assist, you need your closing costs updated again.
Yep. All right.
And then it's as simple as slacking is probably the easiest way, but just make sure that you're keeping myself and Jonery informed of any changes to the contract. That way we can make sure that conveyancing accurately updates the title application if applicable. So it doesn't need to be anything extensive, just a quick, hey, there's a CTA in this loop. That's all we need, and we'll figure out the rest.
Well said. All right, so we're through. They've submitted a mortgage application. They submitted a title application. We've negotiated the home inspection. Typically, this is the point where a second deposit may be due. we're in an interesting, in 2020 up until 2023, we saw second deposits just become one big first deposit. If there's a second deposit due, it's going to be timed out, it's going to be in the deadlines. Typically, that's when that happens. So that's going to be number one. Any deposit paid within 30 days needs to be certified funds or wired. A personal check will not cut it. So even if you're settling within 30 days, you need to have certified funds, meaning a certified check from the bank or a wire. I recommend the wire. It's way easier. That's what you want to do. So we get past all that. So all deposits are paid, inspections negotiated. Now we get into a lot of like title and municipal stuff. So why don't you kind of take the lead here, Ange?
Well, I guess we'll start with the title commitment. So at a certain point throughout the transaction, you will be receiving an email from the title company sending you the title commitment for review. You want to make sure that you're reviewing that and that it's a clean commitment and there's nothing on there that would impact your buyers purchasing the home or anything that would come up that would cause issue. Again, if you don't know what you're looking at, go to Brian, the sales manager, and he can help you read through it. You can also, don't hesitate to ask the title company if you have any questions on it. But that is something that you want to make sure that you're receiving and reviewing with your clients.
If you don't read the title report and there's a problem, they're going to look at the real estate agent as the reason why. So a little preparation goes a long way here. So again, they're going to give you a heads up about it, but this is our responsibility as licensed real estate agents to look at this stuff. So, I'm a big believer in that it's always my fault and I'm always causing the matter. That goes a long way with your clients. So we're going to look at title, make sure that's all clear. What happens after that?
If there is a U&O required on the home, that stands for use and occupancy. Certain municipalities have their own requirements and inspections that are required of the seller. There are cases where there may be buyer responsible for it, but we'll touch on the actual organizing of the U&O more in the seller portion. But if there is a U&O required on the home, you want to make sure that you're receiving a certification from the listing agent prior to settlement. Suburban Realtors Alliance, you want to make sure you have access to that because it's a great resource to go over all of the municipal requirements of most of the counties that we work in.
Great point. So you want to make sure you get the cert there. That's typically the seller's responsibility. You're going to know if they have to let the buyer know if they're not going to be doing something. So that you'll be on notice on that. Make sure you read the MLS, check the comments, look at the contract. The other thing that's going to come due is going to be the mortgage commitment. So we didn't actually have this in our outline here. So the mortgage commitment, it's a written document from the lender that has to be delivered by a certain date. You specify the date when this has to happen in that email, correct?
Yes, I do.
So it's something you enter into the contract under the mortgage contingency. And it lists all the conditions that need to be cleared to get funding for the property so the mortgage gets approved. Typically, you're seeing things like verification of employment, updated bank statements, normal things. If it's conditioned on an appraisal, that's a little bit of a challenge. I'll explain why in a second. If there's anything unusual in there, this is what the agreement of sale says, any unusual conditions that are not the norm, it's not the exact language, that's what it means, then you as the buyer and the buyer agent, you got 7 days to remove those conditions. So if the appraisal didn't come in time, or you set up a mortgage commitment that's way too soon, you want to space these out with plenty of time. So if it's a 30-day close, I'm giving 21 days for the commitment. If it's a 60-day close, I'm giving 45 days for the commitment. Sometimes this gets negotiated up. Don't back yourself into the corner, because if that comes and goes and you don't deliver a commitment by that date, the seller can terminate the agreement. So if the mortgage commitment isn't delivered by the date, the seller can terminate the agreement and your buyer is out of luck. Not a place you want to be in. So with all that in mind, there's going to be things on there. Typically, you're not responsible for them except the appraisal. I'd be making sure that appraisal's happening pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Anything else you've run into with mortgage commitments?
Just making sure that, again, most of it's not our responsibility, but making sure that both the lender and your buyer are working together to clear any conditions that arise. because you don't want to get down to the nitty gritty and finding out they're having trouble getting in touch with the employer to verify employment or something. So just making sure they're on top of clearing all the conditions with their lender.
So besides that, so we get the mortgage commitment, that's delivered. We've hit UNO. We've got title. We've checked off a lot of boxes here. What happens next for the agent?
If it's part of a condo or HOA association, you want to make sure that you're receiving the resale package. Normally, this is delivered via email. So it's 15 days in the agreement that the seller has to order the resale package. So I do assign that to you in dot loop. So if that 15th day has come and gone and you haven't received the resale package, you want to make sure that you're reaching out to the listing agent to verify that it was ordered, because your buyer is entitled to review that and make sure they're in agreement with all of the rules, regulations, financials, all the tedious documentation of the association, that they're in agreement and know what they're getting into.
And the buyer can kill the deal. So they got 5 days. Once you get those docs, 5 days is the window to kill the deal for any reason. Doesn't matter. So the sooner you get them that, the better off you are. I would be getting the written signed, like I received the documents form, because that way everyone knows when the buyer got it. It's called receipt of docs. And that way you can send that to them directly. So that's going to eliminate that for you. That's going to be a big hurdle to get through. Besides that, once we get through all these steps here, we've hit on title, mortgage, UNO, inspections. We're pretty much home free. Is there anything else I missed?
I don't think so. At this point, you just want to get to setting up closing.
And before you set up closing, and actually, let's talk about that. Here's when you don't want to set up settlement. First thing in the morning. Because you know what's good to do first thing in the morning? Make phone calls and set more appointments. On top of that, how often do you see a lender not ready for settlement at 9 a.m. and it gets delayed?
A lot.
Constantly. So you're setting yourself up for a poorly scheduled day that's not going to help you generate new business. Don't set up settlement at 9 a.m. I would look at setting it up between like 12 and 3 is kind of a good window, because when you get towards the end of the day, you run into the same things. These people work to the last minute, especially if it's not a lender that we recommend. So I'd be looking at the time of day. I also wouldn't be scheduling them Monday morning or late in the day on Friday, because late in the day on Friday, something goes wrong. You're into next week. That causes a lot of problems with people's schedules. I'd be trying to settle between Tuesday and Thursday. You can now, sometimes the seller's got a date you got to deal with in a negotiation. That's a different situation. If you have control, schedule it during those times. If it's not in your calendar, it doesn't exist. And if you're not prioritizing lead generation time and going to a settlement, you just wasted the day. On top of that, I'd be scheduling all the settlements here in our office.
Yes.
Settlements are boring. You sit there, you make a bunch of small talk. Oh yeah, the house is great. Who cares? You got to go find new clients, right? Go in, smile, play nice, compliment the people a little bit, and then go. You can come in here and do some work. So I'd have the settlements here in our office in Westchester. That's where TA is. Before the settlement, and you know, the sooner you schedule that, the better off you're going to be and get the time you want, right?
Yep.
So you schedule the settlement. I would do that almost right away once you're through inspections and get ahead of that. Prior to that, actually having the settlement, you want to set up a pre-settlement walkthrough. The agreement of sale entitles you to 2 of these things. 2 pre-settlement walkthroughs are what the agreement of sale calls for. The second one, I'd be doing it right before the settlement or the day before the settlement, and you're looking to make sure the property's in its current condition, all the systems work, and any repairs that were agreed on got done. There's a checklist to go through that we have on our resource site. You want to bring that with you and walk through it with the buyer to make sure they understand exactly the kind of home they're getting. And then go right to the settlement or go home, lock it up, whatever. Anything else I missed there?
You want to make sure that your buyers are reviewing their settlement sheets.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Making sure that they understand how much they need to bring to closing, that they have all of that set up with the title company.
You're going to want to review the settlement sheet in advance. You should be reviewing this before your buyer does. And you know what the first thing I look for is? Am I getting paid the right commission on the settlement sheet? You're laughing. Once that closes,
happens.
You're done. And I've seen agents not collect the right amount of money because they're not paying attention. Talk about a bonehead move. So I'm looking to make sure the settlement sheet One, and this is going to be on the seller side. This is where it gets confusing because there's a buyer side and a seller side. On the seller side, I'm making sure that our firm got paid the agreed upon price based on the commission rate advertised in the MLS. Then I'm making sure the conveyancing fee is on there because that comes out of our pocket as well. These are the first two things I'm looking for. Then I'll go through the other side and review that with the buyer. But this is the thing. The buyer side has nothing to do with how the buyer agent, meaning our office, gets paid. So you got to check for yourself, and then you want to run through and check all the buyer's costs and be prepared to explain that. If you can't explain it, learn how to, because people aren't going to do it for you.
Yeah. And I mean, and once it's closed, it's closed. Like I don't even know how many times I have to go to someone and be like, you guys were shorted about $800 in commission. So just make sure you
Bad business.
want to make sure you're checking it.
And you also, and the other thing to check for is, like, was there a seller assist that was agreed upon? Is that in there? Like, you want to go through the closing cost estimate you prepared and make sure it's going to be close. You sign, you get done, and then the last thing you want to do after all this, hey, can you write a Google review for us? Here's a QR code. The link is reviewtool, mylastname.com. This will mean a lot to our business. I'd be asking for these reviews after you get through inspections, after you get an offer accepted, at high points in the transactions, because we're going to market you as a great agent the more reviews you get, and that's going to help you earn more business when you go interview with more people. And I'd also be asking, hey, who do you know that's looking to buy or sell a home? Because it's a great opportunity to ask for referrals. Everyone gets paid more on those, specifically our agents. It's a win-win. That's the time to do it. That's how to run through the buyer side pending sale. Follow this. Watch it a couple times. Know the process. It's going to make your life a lot easier, and it's going to help you close more business because you know what happens next.